Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Roman Blake ran his calloused hand over the smooth oak of the kitchen cabinet, feeling for imperfections. Finding none, he stepped back and admired his work. The newly installed cabinets transformed their modest Portland kitchen from dated to timeless. 3 years as a small business owner hadn't diminished his carpenter's instincts or his pride in craftsmanship. The front door slammed. Roman glanced at his watch. 6:30 p.m., earlier than he expected Marla home. "You're still working on those?" Marla's voice carried a sharp edge as she dropped her designer bag on the counter. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, her face flushed with irritation. "Just finished, actually." Roman wiped his hands on a rag. "How was your meeting?" "Cancel." She pulled out her phone, thumbs already tapping away. "Third client this month, to bail last minute. This influencer economy is killing me." Roman moved toward her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "That's rough. Maybe we could." "Not now, Roman." She shrugged away from his touch. "I need to salvage what's left of my day." Her eyes never left her phone screen. "Why are you always around, anyway? Don't you have jobs outside the house?" The comment stung, but Roman's expression remained neutral. "Thought I'd save us a few thousand by doing this myself." He gestured to the cabinets. "Plus, it's Tuesday. I always work from home on Tuesdays." "Right." Marla walked to the refrigerator, grabbed a sparkling water, and headed toward their home office. "I'll be working late. Don't wait up." Roman stood alone in the kitchen, the silence settling around him like dust. He turned to the refrigerator, pulled out ingredients, and began preparing dinner enough for two, though he suspected he'd be eating alone. Again, 2 weeks later, Roman made reservations at Hildebrand's, the upscale restaurant where he and Marla had celebrated their first anniversary 5 years ago. He'd spent the afternoon selecting a bottle of her favorite Pinot Noir, a small boutique label she'd discovered on their weekend trip to Willamette Valley 3 summers back. Before things began changing between them, he arrived early, dressed in the navy blazer she once said brought out the blue in his eyes. The hostess led him to a corner table with a view of the Willamette River. "Perfect." Roman checked his watch. 7:10 p.m. Their reservation was for 7 o'clock. He texted Marla a gentle reminder, "Table's ready. View is amazing tonight." The response came 10 minutes later, "Running late. Start without me." Roman ordered a glass of bourbon and sipped it slowly, watching couples at nearby tables lean in toward each other, laughing, touching hands across white tablecloths. The bourbon burned pleasantly down his throat. The waiter approached twice to ask if he was ready to order. Both times, Roman declined with a polite smile and a gesture at the empty chair across from him, a T740. Marla appeared at the entrance. Roman's heart lifted briefly before he noticed her outfit: black leggings, a loose athletic top, and running shoes. Her hair was damp, pulled back in a messy bun. She spotted him and wove through the tables, oblivious to the sideways glances from other diners in evening wear. "Sorry," she said, dropping into her chair without a kiss or greeting. "Yoga class ran long, and I didn't have time to change." Roman pushed the bottle of wine toward her. "I got your favorite." Marla glanced at the label without enthusiasm. "I'm off alcohol this month. Cleanse." She picked up the menu. "God, I'm starving, though." Roman watched her scan the options, trying to reconcile this woman with the one who'd once spent 2 hours getting ready for date night, who used to insist they dress for dinner like real adults. He wondered when she'd stopped caring what he thought. They ordered sea bass for her, steak for him. The conversation faltered repeatedly. Roman asked about her clients. Marla gave terse answers before steering the topic to her new fitness instructor's revolutionary approach to core training. Roman talked about his latest custom furniture commission. Marla checked her phone 3 times during his explanation. Their entrees arrived. Marla took a bite of her fish and nodded approvingly. "Remember the first time we came here?" Roman asked, trying once more. "You wore that red dress." "Roman." Marla set down her fork. "I need to say something, and I don't know how to put it gently." The quiet confidence in her voice silenced him. He'd heard this tone before, the same one she used with clients she was about to drop. "I'm not sure this marriage is what I want anymore." The words hung between them like smoke. Roman felt his chest tighten, but his face remained composed. Years of managing difficult clients had taught him to control his expressions. "What do you want, then?" His voice came out steady. Marla speared a piece of fish. "I don't know. Something different. I feel stuck, like we're just going through motions." She looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time that evening. "Don't you ever feel that way?" Roman considered the question carefully. "No," he said finally. "I don't." Marla sighed, the sound heavy with disappointment. "See? That's part of the problem. You're so content, so unchanged. I'm evolving, Roman. I need space to figure out who I'm becoming." Roman took a drink of water, noting her word choice. "Not who we're becoming, but who I'm becoming." As if they'd stopped being a we long ago. "I see," he said, because there was nothing else to say. He didn't argue, didn't plead, just noted it, filed it away, like he'd done with 100 small rejections over the past year. They finished dinner in silence. Roman paid the bill. They drove home. Separately, she'd met him at the restaurant straight from her yoga studio. At home, they moved around each other like strangers sharing an Airbnb, careful not to touch, retreating to opposite ends of the house. That night, lying beside her in bed, watching her scroll through social media with her back to him, Roman realized something had broken inside him. Not his heart, something deeper, more fundamental. His faith in them. 3 weeks passed. Roman threw himself into his work, taking on more custom furniture projects than was sensible for one man. He was in the middle of installing built-in bookshelves for a tech executive's home office when the pain started a dull ache in his right side that he dismissed as muscle strain. By mid-afternoon, the pain had sharpened to something that demanded attention. Roman climbed down from his stepladder, his vision suddenly spotting black at the edges. He fumbled for his phone, managed to dial his assistant Jake before the world tilted sideways. Jake found him unconscious, curled on his side among sawdust and tools. The paramedics arrived 7 minutes later. Roman drifted in and out of consciousness in the ambulance. Words floated above him. Internal bleeding, pressure dropping, need to move fast. Through the haze of pain, he felt the ambulance swerve and accelerate. In the ER, a flurry of activity surrounded him. A nurse with kind eyes held his hand while another cut away his shirt. A doctor shouted orders. Someone asked for his emergency contact. "Wife," Roman managed to say. "Marla Blake." They called her, then called again, and again. Roman was being prepped for emergency surgery when Marla finally arrived, breathless and annoyed. He glimpsed her through half-closed eyes, standing at the foot of his gurney, her face tight with inconvenience rather than concern. "Mrs. Blake," the nurse said, "we need to move quickly. Can you help us with some information while they prep him?" Marla glanced at her watch. "I have a client meeting in 40 minutes. How long will this take?" The nurse blinked, taken aback. "Your husband has internal bleeding. He needs immediate surgery. But he'll be fine, right?" Marla's voice held more irritation than question. "We're doing everything we can," the nurse said. "If you could just assist with some paperwork." "For God's sake," Marla muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm not his babysitter." The words cut through Roman's pain-fogged brain with perfect clarity. Everything around him slowed. The beeping machines, the urgent voices, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum, all faded to background noise. There was only Marla's face, tight with annoyance, and her words echoing in his mind that I'm not his babysitter. Roman felt something shift inside him, something more profound than the physical damage that had brought him here. The last thread connecting him to Marla snapped. The anesthesiologist leaned over him. "Count backward from 10, Mr. Blake." Roman complied, each number taking him further from Marla, from their marriage, from the life he'd built around loving someone who couldn't love him back. 10, 9, by 7, he knew he was done. Roman woke to white ceiling tiles and the steady rhythm of monitors. His body felt hollow, emptied of something essential. The surgery had been successful, they told him. A ruptured vessel, caught in time. He was lucky that he didn't feel lucky. He felt clear-headed for the first time in years. Marla visited briefly each day, always with excuses about why she couldn't stay longer. Client emergencies, deadlines, a networking event she couldn't miss. Roman listened to her explanations without comment, watching her with new eyes. He wondered how he'd missed so much for so long that on the third day, as Marla prepared to leave after a 15-minute visit, a different nurse entered, older, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Blake, before you go, could you help your husband to the bathroom? He needs to start moving, but shouldn't do it alone the first time." Marla froze, her designer handbag halfway to her shoulder. I have a meeting. Can't one of you do it?" The nurse's expression didn't change, but something in her posture did. "We're short-staffed today, and it would be better if family assisted." She paused. "He is your husband?" "Yes." "Of course he is," Marla snapped. "But I'm not." She stopped herself, but Roman heard the unfinished sentence anyway, that I'm not his babysitter. "Not what, Mrs. Blake?" the nurse prompted. "Not able to stay," Marla finished lamely. "I really do have a meeting." The nurse nodded once, her disappointment evident. "I understand. I'll find someone else to help him." After Marla left, the room fell into blessed silence. Roman stared at the ceiling, his decision solidifying like concrete setting. No drama needed, no confrontation, just the clearest exit he could manage. "You deserve better," the nurse said quietly as she helped him to the bathroom later. Roman wasn't sure if she meant better care or a better wife, but he nodded anyway. On both counts, she was right. 5 days after surgery, Roman was discharged with instructions for rest and follow-up appointments. Marla drove him home, filling the car with chatter about a potential new client and how behind she was on her projects after all this disruption. Roman let the words wash over him without response. At tea home, he moved carefully through their house, seeing everything with the strange clarity of someone about to leave a place forever. The furniture he'd built with his own hands. The photos on the walls, fewer of them together in recent years. More of Marla with colleagues and fitness friends. The kitchen where he'd cooked thousands of meals while Marla worked late. He waited until the next day, when Marla had left for a lunch meeting that would undoubtedly stretch into evening. Then he packed methodically one duffel bag of clothes, his essential tools, important documents he kept in his office safe. He left behind everything he'd built for their home. The dining table that had taken him 3 months to perfect. The bed frame of black walnut with the hidden compartments. The floating shelves and built-in cabinetry. All of it belonged to this house. To this life he was leaving. On the kitchen counter, he placed his wedding ring, neatly centered on a folded note that read simply, "You're free now." So Roman took one last look around, then closed the door quietly behind him. No drama, no raised voices, just a clean break, like removing a splinter that had festered too long. That evening, when Marla returned home to an empty house and found his ring, she actually laughed, and sent him a text. "Another one of your dramatic gestures? Call me when you're done pouting." Roman read the message from a motel room 50 miles away. He didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The cabin on the outskirts of Bend wasn't much a one-bedroom rental with a leaky roof and questionable heating, but it was anonymous and available for cash. No questions asked. Roman spent the first 3 days sleeping, his body still recovering from surgery and the long drive east. On the 4th day, he ventured into town. Bend was everything Portland wasn't: smaller, slower, still connected to its lumbertown roots despite the influx of outdoor enthusiasts and remote workers. Roman felt something loosen in his chest as he walked along the Deschutes River, watching kayakers navigate the gentle rapids. No one here knew him as Marla Blake's husband. No one knew him at all that he found a job at Cascade Timber, a local mill that was shorthanded after 2 workers left for higher-paying positions in Washington. The foreman, a grizzled man named Pete, looked at Roman's hands calloused, scarred from years of working with wood, and hired him on the spot. "Don't need your life story," Pete said when Roman started to explain his background. "Just need to know you'll show up and work hard." The physical labor was exactly what Roman needed. Loading raw timber, operating the saw, stacking finished planks. The work demanded complete attention and left no room for brooding. At night, he fell into bed exhausted, too tired even to dream of Marla or the life he'd left behind. 2 weeks in, a coworker mentioned a room for rent above a diner in town, cheaper than the cabin, with better heating. "Owner's a single mom," the man said. Tough as nails, but fair. Name's Jules. Tell her Duke sent you. The diner Timber Grain occupied the ground floor of a converted Victorian on the quieter end of downtown. Roman arrived between the lunch and dinner rushes, when only a few customers lingered over coffee. Behind the counter stood a woman with copper-colored hair cut in a practical bob, efficiently organizing receipts while keeping one eye on the grill. Jules. Roman approached the counter. She looked up, assessing him with sharp green eyes. That's me. What can I get you? Duke mentioned you might have a room for rent. Her expression remained neutral, but her gaze intensified, taking in every detail: his worn work clothes, the fading bruise on his forearm from the mill, the careful way he held himself, still protecting his healing side. Duke vouching for you means something, she said finally. But I've got a 10-year-old daughter, so I need to know you're not trouble. No trouble, Roman said. Just needed a change of scenery. Jules studied him a moment longer. Room small. Shared bathroom in the hall. No overnight guests without clearing it with me first. $500 a month. Includes utilities and breakfast. Roman nodded. When can I move in? Now works. She pulled a key from under the counter and held it out. First month's rent due today. After that, pay by the 5th. Roman counted out the cash. Jules didn't ask for a last name or references. In a town like Bend, a recommendation from Duke and cash in hand were references enough. The room was indeed small, just space for a bed, dresser, and small desk beneath a window that overlooked the river. But it was clean, and the radiator worked, and when Roman lay down on the bed, he felt something close to peace for the first time in months. Roman settled into a routine. Mornings at the mill, evenings helping Jules with minor repairs around the diner in exchange for dinner. He spoke little, but the more he observed Jules, the more he respected her. She ran the diner with ruthless efficiency, managed her daughter Mia's schedule without complaint, and still found time to organize a monthly food drive for local families struggling after the tourism season ended one evening. As Roman fixed a leaking pipe under the diner's sink, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a military-straight posture entered through the back door. Pipe burst again? The man asked, his voice a deep rumble. Just a leak this time, Jules replied, handing him a coffee mug. Theo, meet Roman. He's renting the back room upstairs. Theo nodded at Roman. Former military? Roman shook his head. Former carpenter. Huh, you move like someone trained. Situational awareness. Theo sipped his coffee. I run wilderness survival courses outside town. Could use someone with building skills if you're ever looking for side work. And just like that, Roman's circle expanded. Theo's offer turned into weekend work, helping maintain the cabins at his survival school. The physical labor in mountain air accelerated Roman's healing, both physically and mentally. Theo, a former Marine, didn't ask personal questions but offered practical wisdom in terse sentences while they worked. Can't change the past, he said once, when Roman's silence had stretched too long. Can only control what you build next. Through Theo, Roman met Keegan, a tech company dropout who'd abandoned Silicon Valley burnout for a simpler life, carving with sculptures that sold to tourists for surprising sums. Keegan's studio was a converted barn filled with half-finished pieces and the sharp scent of pine. Theo says you've got builder's hands, Keegan said the first time they met, examining Roman's calluses without preamble. Want to try something more creative than cabin repair? That weekend, Roman shaped his first sculpture, a rough hawk emerging from a block of juniper. It was amateur work, but Keegan nodded approvingly. You got an eye, he said. Come back next weekend. I'll teach you about finishing techniques. Gradually, over months that stretched into a year, Roman found himself part of a loose-knit family. Jules, with her no-nonsense efficiency and quiet kindness. Theo, solid as bedrock, dispensing wisdom between survival lessons. Keegan, whose artistic chaos balanced Roman's precision. Even Mia, Jules' daughter, who decided Roman needed to learn the rules of her favorite card game and appointed herself as teacher. None of them pressed him about his past. In Bend, it seemed everyone was reinventing themselves in some way. Your history mattered less than what you brought to the table today. In the evenings, after dinner at the diner, Roman began sketching furniture designs ideas that had lived in his head for years but never found form during his marriage. Marla had always pushed for practical pieces that would appeal to her friends and colleagues. These new designs were different, raw-edged, incorporating the natural shape of the wood rather than forcing it into conventional forms. Jules noticed him sketching one night as she closed up the diner. "Those for clients?" she asked, wiping down the counter. Roman shook his head. "Just ideas." She studied the sketch, a coffee table with a river of blue epoxy running through natural wood. "You should make them. I display that in here in a heartbeat." 2 weeks later, Roman completed the river table using salvaged wood from the mill and epoxy Keegan helped him source. Jules cleared a space near the diner's front window and displayed it with a discreet "for sale" sign. IT sold the next day for twice what Roman thought it was worth. "Told you," Jules said, handing him the money. "Tourists love authentic craftsmanship. You should make more." So he did. Small pieces at first end tables, wall shelves, cutting boards inlaid with contrasting woods. Each sold quickly. Word spread. Jules created a waiting list for custom orders. "You need a business name," she told him one evening. "Something people remember." Roman thought about it for days, sketching potential logos between shifts at the mill. He wanted something that captured both strength and transformation. Finally, it came to him: Blake Ironwood. "Blake's your last name?" Jules asked when he showed her the logo, a stylized tree with iron black roots. Roman nodded, offering no further explanation. It was the first personal detail he'd shared. Jules didn't push. "Good name. Strong." With his next commission payment, Roman rented a small workshop space not far from Keegan's studio. He reduced his hours at the mill to part-time, then left entirely as orders for Blake Ironwood pieces steadily increased. Keegan introduced him to a website designer who created a simple online presence. Theo, with his connections to wealthy outdoor enthusiasts, sent clients Roman's way. For the first time in years, Roman felt fully engaged in work that expressed his vision, not someone else's expectations. The constant, low-grade anxiety that had been his companion during the final years with Marla faded. He slept deeply, woke without dread, moved through his days with purpose. He never spoke of Marla, never mentioned Portland or his former life. But sometimes, in quiet moments, he would touch the scar on his side, now a thin white line, and remember the hospital room where he'd made his decision. He felt no triumph, no vindication, just a calm certainty that he'd done what was necessary for his own survival. Back in Portland, Marla's carefully constructed life was unraveling. After the initial shock of Roman's departure wore off, she convinced herself it was for the best. She'd been feeling trapped, hadn't she? Now she was free to evolve, to find herself, to date the kind of dynamic, ambitious men she encountered in her professional circle rather than staying tied to a craftsman who was content with simple success. The first hit came when 3 major clients dropped her digital marketing services within the same month. Her business, built largely on Roman's connections in the custom home and furniture world, began to struggle without those referrals. Former clients chose loyalty to the craftsman who'd built their dream spaces over the marketing consultant they barely knew. Then came Darren, a personal trainer she met at her gym, with perfect abs and an Instagram following in the thousands. He moved into her house, their house, though she'd stopped thinking of it as such 6 weeks after they started dating. His possessions multiplied throughout the space, displacing Roman's carefully built furniture to the garage, then to consignment shops, when Darren complained the house felt too masculine, too heavy. Darren had ambitious plans for a fitness empire, which Marla eagerly supported with her remaining savings and marketing expertise. 8 months in, she returned from a weekend visiting her parents to find Darren gone, along with $17,000 from their joint account and her grandmother's jewelry. Alone in the house that now felt both empty and unfamiliar, Marla realized how thoroughly she'd dismantled her life. The beautiful furniture Roman had built sold to fund Darren's business expenses. The connections her husband had nurtured for years severed by her dismissive attitude after he left. The reputation she'd built as half of a successful, creative partnership tarnished by industry gossip about how she'd treated the craftsman everyone respected, and Roman himself gone without a trace. Her text messages went unanswered. Mutual friends claimed no knowledge of his whereabouts. Even his former business partner said they hadn't heard from him in months. Late one night, after too many glasses of wine and hours scrolling through old photos, Marla finally broke down and called him. The phone rang 4 times before connecting to voicemail. "Roman," she said, her voice breaking. "It's me. I don't know where to start. Everything's such a mess, and I wasn't in my right mind when you left. I didn't appreciate what we had. Please call me back. Please." She hung up, certain he would respond to the raw emotion in her voice, but he didn't. She called again the next week and the week after that. Sometimes composed, sometimes tearful, always ending with some version of "call me back." Roman's voicemail became her confessional, the only place she could admit how badly she'd failed, how desperately she needed a second chance. If he listened to the messages, he gave no sign. 2 years after leaving Portland, Roman received a text from Cassidy, one of the few mutual friends he'd maintained minimal contact with. "Heads up, Marla's telling people she's talking to lawyers about your abandonment and claiming rights to your new business. Says since you were married when you started it, she's entitled to half. Thought you should know." Roman stared at the message, feeling a cold fury he thought he'd left behind. Even now, after everything, she was still trying to take from him. That evening, he sat with Jules, Theo, and Keegan at a back table in the closed diner, the text message displayed on his phone between them. "Time to tell us the full story," Jules said, no judgment in her voice, just practical concern. Yes, Roman did. The slow disintegration of his marriage. Marla's casual cruelty. The hospital room revelation. His decision to start over without drama or combat. And now she wants half your business. Keegan whistled low. "After treating you like that." "Classic narcissist move," Theo said with military precision. "When their own life falls apart, they look for something to salvage from the wreckage they created." "What will you do?" Jules asked, her green eyes steady on Roman's face. Roman considered the question carefully. 2 years ago, he might have simply walked away again, started over somewhere new rather than engage. But Blake Ironwood wasn't just a business. It was tangible proof that he could rebuild from nothing, create beauty for brokenness. "I'm not running this time," he said quietly, "and I'm not letting her take what I've built from the pain she caused." Jules nodded, as if she'd expected nothing less. "Then you fight, and we help." That night, Roman lay awake in his room above the diner, planning his response. This wouldn't be an emotional reaction, but a calculated defense, perhaps even a counterattack. For the first time, he allowed himself to fully feel the anger he'd suppressed for years. Not the destructive kind that consumed you from within, but the clarifying kind that crystallized into purpose. Marla had taught him a valuable lesson. After all, some people didn't want closure. They wanted consequences. The drive to Portland felt like traveling backward in time. As the landscape changed from high desert to dense forest, Roman found himself gripping the steering wheel tighter, his jaw clenched against memories. He'd left no loose ends here, no unfinished business, except for the divorce papers Marla had never signed either out of spite or simple negligence. He checked into a hotel downtown, far from their old neighborhood. The city had changed in subtle ways during his absence, but the essential character remained the mix of creative energy and pretension that had once felt like home. His first stop was the offices of Voss Legal, a boutique firm specializing in complex divorces and business protections. Darcy Voss had come highly recommended by one of Theo's clients. Ruthless but ethical was the exact description. Roman had made his appointment under Blake, the name he now used professionally. The office occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in the Pearl District. Modern, minimal, with none of the dark wood and leather that characterized traditional law firms. Darcy Voss matched her surroundings crisp, contemporary, devoid of unnecessary ornament. Her handshake was firm, her assessment of Roman direct. "Tell me everything," she said once they were seated in her glass-walled office. "And don't edit for sympathy. I need facts, not narrative." For the next hour, Roman laid out his history with Marla, the marriage, the deterioration, his departure, the business he'd built afterward, and now her threats. Darcy took minimal notes, asking occasional clarifying questions with laser precision. Did you formally divorce? She asked. No, I left papers, but she never signed. Did you register Blake Ironwood under your legal name? No, just Blake. Any formal business partnership documentation between you and your friends and band? Nothing written. They display my work, refer clients, but it's informal. Darcy's expression remained neutral, but Roman caught a slight narrowing of her eyes' interest, possibly approval. You've accidentally done several things right, she said when he finished. First, by not formalizing your business under your full legal name, you've created a buffer. Second, by operating in a different city without divorce finalization, you've established de facto separation without court involvement. She tapped her pen against her notepad. Here's what we do. First, we create a business trust with your friends as nominal trustees backdated to when you began selling pieces through the diner. Second, we file for divorce citing irreconcilable differences, but we don't mention your current business. There's nothing connecting Roman Blake to Blake Ironwood except your say-so. Is that legal? Roman asked. That Darcy's smile was thin but genuine. Completely. You're using your artistic name, which many craftspeople do. The trust existed in practice through your working relationship with these friends. We're just formalizing it. Nothing requires you to volunteer information about assets acquired after separation. She leaned forward. But let me be clear. If directly asked in court about current income sources, you cannot lie. We'll need to prepare for that possibility. Roman nodded, understanding. What else? We need leverage. Something to make pursuing this case unattractive to her. Darcy's eyes sharpened. Tell me about her business. Her vulnerabilities. Roman hesitated. Despite everything, the idea of deliberately damaging Marla felt foreign to his nature. But he remembered her words in the hospital. Remembered the voicemails that never acknowledged how deeply she'd hurt him, only how much she now needed him. Her client base has been shrinking, he said finally. She depends heavily on reputation and referrals. And she's not always ethical in her reporting to clients about engagement metrics. Darcy nodded, understanding the implications. One last question. What do you want from this? Financial protection? Public vindication? Closure? Roman considered carefully. I want to be completely free of her. And I want her to understand there are consequences to treating people as disposable. Good. Clear objectives. Darcy closed her notebook. I'll draft the trust documents today. You'll need your friends to sign as soon as possible. Meanwhile, I suggest maintaining your low profile. If Marla doesn't know exactly where you are or what you're doing, that works in our favor. As Roman left the office, he felt a weight lifting. He'd spent 2 years rebuilding in silence, asking nothing of Marla, not even acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused. If she wanted conflict now, he would meet it not with the emotional reactivity she expected, but with calculated precision. Back in his hotel room, Roman made a series of calls. First to Jules, Theo, and Keegan, explaining Darcy's trust strategy. All three agreed immediately to sign whatever documents were needed. We should have done this formally from the beginning, Jules said, practical as always. This just makes official what was already true. Blake Ironwood exists because of all of us, not just you. His second call was to Cassidy, his most reliable source of information about Marla's activities in Portland. She's been talking to Brenner and Associates, Cassidy confirmed. Mid-tier firm, known for aggressive tactics. She's telling people it's about abandonment, but I've heard her mention intellectual property theft, too, claiming you took client contacts when you left. Roman absorbed this with grim amusement. Interesting pivot, considering I left everything behind, including my client list. She's desperate, Cassidy said bluntly. After Darren cleaned out their accounts, she's been struggling. The house is on the market, probably has to be, given the mortgage. And her client roster is thin. Has she mentioned where I am? What I'm doing? That's the weird part. She talks like she knows exactly what you're up to, but the details keep changing. Sometimes you're in Seattle with a huge furniture company. Sometimes you're in California designing for celebrities. She has no idea where you actually are. This confirmed what Roman had suspected. Marla was operating on assumptions, not facts. An advantage he intended to keep. One more thing, he said before ending the call. If you hear her mentioning Blake Ironwood, let me know immediately. His third call was the hardest to Jake, his former assistant who now ran the custom furniture business Roman had abandoned in Portland. Boss. Jake's surprise was evident. Holy shit, it's been forever. You okay? I'm good, Roman said, surprised to find it was true. Better than I was. How's business? Steady. Took a hit when you left, but we recovered. Your design influence still shows in everything we build. Jake paused. Marla came by the shop a few months back, asking questions about you. Roman tensed. What kind of questions? Where you went? Who you're working with now? I told her I hadn't heard from you since you left, which was true until now. Did she believe you? Seemed to. Jake hesitated. She didn't look good, Roman. Finn stressed. Said some things about mistakes and second chances. Roman let the silence stretch, unwilling to be drawn into sympathy for Marla's current situation. She'd made her choices. Now she was living with them. I may need a favor, he said finally. Nothing that puts your business at risk. Just information if she comes around again. Anything, Jake said immediately. You gave me my start when no one else would take a chance. Whatever you need. After ending the call, Roman stood at the hotel window, looking out at the Portland skyline. The anger that had driven him here was transforming into something cooler, more focused. Not revenge, exactly, but a determination to protect what he'd built and ensure Marla understood the full consequences of her actions. The next morning, an anonymous email arrived at the inboxes of Marla's remaining clients. The sender was untraceable, the message simple. A link to court records of a pending lawsuit against Marla Blake for intellectual property theft, with a note suggesting recipients verify the ethics of your marketing consultant before proceeding. No such lawsuit existed yet, but the rumor alone would do damage in Portland's tight-knit creative community. By noon, Marla had received 3 concerned calls from clients wanting explanation. By evening, 2 had suspended their contracts pending clarification of the situation. Cassidy, following Roman's guidance, expressed sympathy to Marla while subtly reinforcing doubts. It just seems odd that Roman would sue now. After all this time, she said over coffee with Marla. Unless there's something I don't know about. Marla, desperate for allies, revealed more than she intended. He's built a business on contacts he took from our marriage. It's called Blake Ironwood Pretentious, right? Making furniture for rich people in Bend while I've been struggling to rebuild after he abandoned me. Cassidy's eyes widened in genuine surprise. Bend? You're sure? Marla hesitated, then nodded. Pretty sure. A client mentioned seeing his work at some diner there. Within the hour, Roman received Cassidy's text. She knows about Bend and Blake Ironwood. Not sure how. Mention a diner. Roman processed this new information calmly. The fact that Marla had somehow connected him to Bend was a complication, but not a disaster. If anything, it might accelerate his plan. That afternoon, Roman met again with Darcy Voss, who had completed the trust documentation for Blake Ironwood. The papers established Jules, Theo, and Keegan as trustees, with Roman as the primary creative contractor, an arrangement that protected the business entity from any claims based on marital assets. These need to be signed immediately and notarized, Darcy said, sliding the documents across her desk. I've arranged for a notary at your hotel at 6 tonight. Once that's done, we move to Phase 2 filing for divorce with provisions that protect your current and future business interests. And if she comes to Bend before that's done, Darcy's expression didn't change, but something in her posture sharpened. Let her. The trust documentation will be backdated appropriately. And a confrontation on your territory with your support system present works in our favor. Roman nodded, seeing the strategy. What about the anonymous email to her clients? I know nothing about any email, Darcy said with the faintest hint of a smile. But if someone were to have sent such a communication, I would note that sharing publicly available information about potential legal concerns is not, strictly speaking, illegal. As Roman left the office, he felt a clarity of purpose he hadn't experienced since leaving Portland 2 years ago. Every step had been calculated, every move designed not for emotional satisfaction, but for practical results. Marla had taught him well, Though not in the way she intended. 3 days later, Roman was back in Bend, the signed and notarized trust documents safely filed. Jules noticed his changed demeanor immediately. "You seem different," she said as they closed the diner that evening. "More present." "I am." Roman wiped down the last table. "For 2 years, I've been hiding. Building something new, yes, but also hiding from what happened. Now I'm facing it." Jules nodded, understanding. "When do you think she'll come?" "Soon. She knows I'm here, or at least suspects it. And she's desperate enough to act on that. We'll be ready." Jules squeezed his shoulder briefly, a rare physical gesture from her. "All of us." The confrontation came sooner than expected. The next day, during the mid-afternoon lull, the diner's door opened and Marla walked in. Roman, helping Jules inventory supplies behind the counter, recognized her instantly despite the changes 2 years had wrought. She was thinner, her designer clothes replaced by simpler attire, her confident stride now hesitant. But her eyes, calculating, assessing, were unchanged. She spotted him and froze, apparently not having expected to find him so easily. "Roman." Jules glanced between them, then quietly moved to the other end of the counter, close enough to intervene if needed but giving them space. Roman met Marla's gaze steadily. "Hello, Marla." She moved toward him, uncertainty and hope warring in her expression. "I've been looking everywhere for you. Why didn't you answer my calls?" "My text." "I had nothing to say." His calm response seemed to unbalance her. She'd expected anger, perhaps, or the wounded vulnerability she remembered. This composed man regarding her with detached interest was a stranger. "I made mistakes," she said, her voice dropping to the intimate tone that once could move him. "Terrible mistakes. I wasn't in my right mind when you left. The things I said in the hospital were exactly what you felt," Roman finished for her. "And they were clarifying. Thank you for that." Marla blinked, thrown by his response. "Thank me? I was awful to you. And you're thanking me?" "Yes." Roman maintained a respectful distance between them. "You show me the truth of our marriage when I needed to see it. Without that moment, I might have stayed trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed." "But it can be fixed," she insisted, stepping closer. "I've changed. Everything fell apart after you left my business, my life. I need you, Roman. I need us again." Roman studied her face, the genuine distress, the tears threatening to spill. 2 years ago, this display would have moved him to comfort her, to try to solve her problems. Now he recognized it for what it was, manipulation born of desperation. "There is no us anymore, Marla. Hasn't been for a long time." His voice remained gentle but firm. "I died in that hospital bed. Whoever you're talking to now isn't your husband." Marla's expression hardened, the vulnerability vanishing like a mask removed. "Is that why you're hiding behind a different name? Blake Ironwood?" "Not hiding. Building something new. With my contacts. My connections." Her voice rose slightly. "Half of that business belongs to me, Roman. We were married when you started it. I've talked to lawyers." Jules moved closer, her presence a quiet support. "Everything all right here?" Roman nodded. "Fine, Jules. This is Marla, my soon-to-be ex-wife." "Marla, this is Jules, one of the owners of Blake Ironwood." Marla looked between them, confusion evident. "Owners? What are you talking about?" "It's your business. Blake Ironwood is a trust," Roman explained calmly. "Established by Jules, Theo, and Keegan 2 years ago. I'm a contractor who creates pieces for them. Has been that way from the beginning." The lie, or rather, the recently formalized truth, landed with precision. Marla's eyes narrowed in calculation, assessing this new information against her planned legal strategy. "I don't believe you," she said finally. "This is just another way to hide assets from me. Believe what you want." Roman's tone remained even. "The documentation exists. Predates any legal action you might be contemplating." Marla's composure slipped further. "You can't just erase our marriage, our history. You owe me." "I owe you nothing," Roman interrupted, his voice still quiet but with an edge of finality. "I left everything we built together in Portland. The house, the furniture, the business contacts. Started over with nothing but my hands and my skills. While I struggled," Marla's voice rose. "While that bastard Darren cleaned out our accounts and disappeared. While my business fell apart. Your choices, your consequences. Roman met her gaze steadily. Just like mine were mine. The diner had gone silent, the few remaining customers watching the confrontation with undisguised interest. Jules moved closer to Roman, her expression making it clear whose side she was on. Marla looked around, suddenly aware of their audience. Her shoulders slumped slightly. "This isn't over," she said, but the threat sounded hollow, even to her own ears. "I'll see you in court, if that's what you want." Roman nodded once. "Darcy Voss has my divorce filing ready. You'll be served tomorrow." At the mention of Darcy's name, Marla paled. Even in her diminished state, she recognized one of Portland's most formidable attorneys. "You're working with Voss?" "Yes, and her investigators have been quite thorough about certain discrepancies in your client reporting. Information that would be relevant in any countersuit regarding Blake Ironwood. It was a calculated risk, this implied threat." Roman watched Marla process it, weighing her options against the potential damage to what remained of her professional reputation. "This isn't who you are," she said finally, a last attempt at leverage. "The Roman I knew wouldn't be so cold, so calculating. The Roman you knew died in that hospital when his wife couldn't be bothered to stay with him through surgery." His voice remained calm, factual rather than accusatory. "I'm not seeking revenge, Marla. Just closure and protection for what I've built since then." They faced each other across the countertop, two strangers who had once shared everything. Roman felt no triumph at her evident defeat, no satisfaction in her distress. Only a quiet certainty that he was, at last, truly free of the past. "Go home, Marla," he said gently. "Sign the divorce papers when they arrive. Keep what you have left in Portland. I'll stay here with what I've built. Clean break, no ongoing connection." For a moment, he thought she might argue further. Instead, her shoulders slumped in resignation. "You've really moved on, haven't you? Built a whole new life without me." "Yes." No cruelty in the admission, just truth. Marla nodded once, a gesture of reluctant acceptance. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the diner. Jules moved beside Roman as the door closed behind Marla. "You okay?" Roman took a deep breath, feeling a weight he hadn't fully acknowledged finally lifting. "Yeah, better than I expected." The court date arrived 6 weeks later, a brief appearance in Portland to finalize the divorce. Marla had ultimately signed the papers without contest, accepting Roman's terms. She kept the Portland house, now heavily mortgaged, and all asset from their shared life. He kept Blake Ironwood and everything he'd built in Bend. The judge, a stern woman with 3 decades on the bench, reviewed the agreement carefully. "This is unusually clean for a separation of this duration," she noted, looking between Roman and Marla, who sat at separate tables with their respective attorneys. "Mr. Blake, you're asking for no share of the marital home or business contacts you helped establish." "That's correct, Your Honor." Roman's voice was steady. "Those were part of our life together. I've moved on entirely." The judge turned to Marla. "And Ms. Blake, you're making no claim on Mr. Blake's current business ventures in Bend, Oregon?" Marla glanced at her attorney, then back to the judge. "No, Your Honor. After review, we've confirmed those ventures were established separately after our effective separation. It wasn't quite the truth, but it was the version they'd agreed to, the version that allowed both to save face and move forward." The judge studied them both for a moment longer, then nodded. "Very well. Based on the unopposed petition and the equitable division of assets as presented, this court grants the divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences." With a strike of her gavel, it was done. Roman and Marla Blake were no longer husband and wife. Outside the courtroom, they faced each other one final time. Marla looked better than she had and been more composed, her clothing once again reflecting the polished professional image she'd always cultivated. "Your lawyer is terrifyingly effective," she said, an acknowledgement of Darcy's role in the outcome. "She understood what I wanted," Roman replied. "A clean end, not a prolonged fight." Marla nodded, then hesitated. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for the hospital, but for all of it. I didn't value what we had until it was gone." Roman studied her face, looking for the manipulation he'd come to expect. Instead, he found what appeared to be genuine regret too late to matter, but real nonetheless. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Marla," he said finally. "Not forgiveness exactly, but a release. Goodbye." He turned and walked away, not looking back, knowing with absolute certainty that this chapter was closed. 2 weeks later, a small gathering assembled at Timber and Grain after closing. Jules, Theo, Keegan, and Roman sat around a table covered with local beer and Jules's famous blackberry pie. "To clean breaks and new beginnings," Theo proposed, raising his glass. "And to Blake Ironwood," Keegan added with a grin. "Now legitimately owned by the four of us, thanks to Roman's paranoid lawyer." "Darcy's not paranoid. She's thorough," Roman corrected, smiling. "And the trust structure makes sense for where we're headed." Jules raised an eyebrow. "And where exactly is that?" Roman pulled out a folder containing preliminary designs for a showroom and expanded workshop space. "I've been thinking it's time to grow. Not huge, but enough to take on larger commissions. Maybe add an apprentice program." The others leaned in, examining the plans with interest. "Ambitious," Theo noted approvingly. "What brought this on?" Roman considered the question. "Closure, I guess. For 2 years, I've been building something new while still tied to the past. Now, there's nothing holding me back." Jules studied him with her characteristic directness. "No regrets about how it ended?" "None," Roman said truthfully. "I didn't want revenge, just consequences. Natural ones from her own actions. And she got them," Keegan pointed out, "while you built something better from the wreckage." Later that evening, after the others had gone, Roman helped Jules clean up. They worked in companionable silence until Jules spoke. "You know, when you first showed up here, I figured you for someone running from something bad. Didn't know if it would catch up with you eventually." Roman paused in wiping down a table. "It did catch up, but I was ready for it." Jules nodded. "That's the difference between running away and moving forward. One is just distance. The other is growth." She walked to the front window where the Blake Ironwood sign now hung prominently, a handcrafted piece Roman had made during the weeks after the confrontation with Marla. The words carved into rich walnut red, "Never settle." Blake Ironwood. "Good sign," Jules said. "Good reminder." Roman stood beside her, looking at the craftsmanship that represented not just his skill, but his journey. The sharp edges of his pain had been sanded smooth, finished into something stronger and more resilient than before. "You know what Theo told me once?" he said quietly. "Can't change the past. Can only control what you build next." Jules smiled. "Smart man, Theo." "Smart friends," Roman corrected. "All of you." Outside, snow had begun to fall, dusting the streets of Bend with fresh white. Roman watched it cover the day's footprints, creating a clean slate for tomorrow. He felt no triumph over Marla, no bitter satisfaction in her downfall. Only peace and the quiet certainty that he had, at last, built something that truly belonged to him, not just a business, but a life worth living. Inside him, where the coldness had lived for so long, he felt warmth returning. Not for Marla, that door was closed forever, but for the future spreading before him. Full of possibilities, he was finally free to explore.